What's going on, guys? MMuniz here. Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to discuss the 3 ETFs that I'm buying and holding on a weekly basis for the rest of my life, or at least until I retire, where I'll probably take advantage of the 3% rule. Now, these 3 ETFs, I also do the same exact thing for my daughter Maxine, who's a year and a half. And I'm going to continue doing that for her until she's probably around 20 years old, or whenever a big life event comes up where she's going to need some money. Now, quick little disclaimer before we get into the video. This video is not financial advice. These are just my opinions to do your own research and decide what's best for you and your family. Now, with these 3 ETFs, I do dollar cost average into these on a weekly basis, and not only my retirement accounts, but also my personal brokerage account. And the last thing I want to say is make sure you guys are set up financially before you're starting a taxable brokerage account. And what I mean by that is, make sure you pay off your high interest debt, make sure you've got a little bit of an emergency fund in case something pops up, and then definitely make sure you're taking advantage of your tax advantaged accounts. If your company offers a 401k match or some type of retirement plan with company match that is free money, you've got to take advantage of it. Make sure if you're eligible, you're maxing out a Roth IRA. Take advantage of an HSA. These are all fantastic options to give you more money in the long term. After that, then you can grow your taxable brokerage account. So with that said, what are the 3 ETFs? Well, the 3 ETFs that we're going to talk about are going to be VOO, VUG, VUG, and VT. I don't know how to say that, so we're just going to say VT. We're going to go over each of these, a little breakdown one by one. And in terms of Max's portfolio, she has a 50% allocation to VOO, a 30% allocation to VUG, and a 20% allocation to VT. And I may change that up a little bit in the future, but for now, this is what we're doing, and we use M1Finance. So let's talk about VOO. So VOO is the Vanguard S&P 500 ETF. So basically, this is an ETF from Vanguard that follows the returns of the S&P 500. Now, what is the S&P 500? Well, it's pretty much the gold standard. It has the 500, or a little bit over 500, of the largest market cap stocks in the US. So you're going to have your mega cap stocks. Now, when I say market cap, that basically just means outstanding shares multiplied by the share price. So the largest market caps are going to be held by companies like Apple, Google, Tesla, stuff like that. So those are going to have a really high weight in this ETF. Now, the great thing about Vanguard ETFs is they typically have an extremely low expense ratio. And over the long term, expense ratios can really eat into your gains, and you don't want that to happen. So when we have a 0.03% expense ratio, that is absolutely fantastic. That is only 30 cents for every $1,000 invested. The other thing I want to talk about the expense ratio, and the reason why I choose VOO over a different ETF that follows the S&P 500 like SPY or SPY, is that ETF has a 0.09% expense ratio. Some people that are into day trading and stuff like that will prefer to use SPY, but for buying and holding, there's no reason to pay more. It's literally 1/3 of the expense ratio, so why not just take advantage of it? Now, when it comes to performance, you may notice that the return year to date is down 9.49%. However, look at the long-term performance. We go down to performance and fees, and we'll scroll down right about here. So in the past 1 year, we are down, yes, and 3-year, 13% annualized average, 5-year, 13%, and we look since inception, which is about 12 years, we have a 14% annualized return year over year. That's pretty fantastic. And now, if you aren't looking at VOO, but you're looking at the benchmark, which is the S&P 500, you can go back 50 years and you're going to see an average return of around 9%. So that's a pretty solid return you're going to have a hard time beating. Now, let's just take a quick look. Let's take a quick look at the portfolio composition. Look at it here, you're going to have a blend of anything large cap. That's exactly what the S&P 500 does. When you go into the sectors, you're going to see there's a pretty good blend, but you do have a higher weight in information technology. And the reason for that is tech generally has the largest market caps. Like I said, Apple, Tesla, Google, those all have huge market caps, so they're weighted a bit heavier. If we go down into the actual top 10 holdings, as I mentioned, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, Berkshire Hathaway, all these are making up a significant portion of the fund. Just the top 5 funds in this list are over 20% of the entire fund. Now, that could actually technically be a problem, because if you get some negative news on a company like Apple or Microsoft and they get a significant decline in share value, then if you're holding an ETF that follows the S&P 500, you're going to see some decline as well. Now, I'm a huge fan of VOO. My entire family's invested in it. My wife, my daughter, even my little sister. And that's just because we believe in buying and holding long-term, as I've mentioned multiple times. But let's talk about ETF number 2, VUG or VUG. So once again, this is going to be a Vanguard ETF that focuses on growth. And the great thing about Vanguard ETFs is this one has a really low expense ratio, 0.04%, which is 40 cents on every $1,000 invested per year. And the great thing about VUG is it's comprised of a large quantity of growth stocks. What that means is they expect that the companies that are held within this ETF are going to grow their earnings significantly in the future. When you look at the sectors for a fund like this, you're going to see a really high concentration in technology, because typically technology is where you expect to see the highest earnings in the future. Now, you're not going to see as good of a dividend. The dividend for VUG is actually only 0.57%, but you can expect to see higher share appreciation over time. At least that's the goal of holding a fund like this. And we look at the performance of this one. The 1 year is down significantly more than VU at 14.5%, but we look at our average returns of 15.5%, 15, 10 year, 15, and then since inception, 10.3%. So pretty close. Long term, the S&P 500 has outperformed, but lately technology is really starting to come back and has actually surpassed the returns of the S&P 500. So once again, long-term fund, except this one focuses on growth and heavily weighted in the technology sector. Another option instead of VUG is QQQ, but I personally prefer VUG because of the expense ratio long-term really makes a big difference, where it's 1/5 of QQQs, which comes in at 0.20%. Now the third ETF we're going to talk about can be one or the other. Basically, it depends on your own personal preference, but you have VTI, which is the total US stock market, or you have VT, which is maybe a bit more controversial, which is the total world stock market. Now, I'm a huge fan of diversification, and that is exactly what this ETF offers. Now, don't get me wrong, it's going to have extremely high concentrations because it's based off market cap. For instance, the US alone is almost 60% of the entire fund, but this fund gives you something that the others we just discussed do not. This fund gives you exposure to not only developed markets like other countries, but emerging markets. So at the end of the day, if you are bullish on the future of the world economy, then VT could be a good option for you. I already told you that Maxine, her portfolio has 20% VT. So maybe I'm not quite as bullish on the entire world as I am on America, but I still do think that there's some great opportunity that can come out of that in the long term. Now, over the past 20 years, the US stock market has definitely outperformed. However, that doesn't mean it's going to be that in the future. Remember, we always talk about past performance does not guarantee future results. So once again, VT is another Vanguard ETF, which, as you can see, I'm a huge fan. No, I am not sponsored. I just like cheap ETFs that have great performance. And the expense ratio for this one is going to be 0.07%, or 70 cents per $1,000 invested on a yearly basis. And to take a quick look at the performance, since inception, it has a 6.5% return on a yearly basis. That does not include the 1.5% dividend, but it is much lower. And once again, that is because the US has outperformed. However, that doesn't mean that's what's going to happen in 10, 20 years from now. So it could be a good opportunity. Over the past 10 years, you've had a 10% return, which is pretty solid. So all in all, this video has discussed the 3 ETFs that I'm going to continue investing into on a weekly or monthly basis for the long term. Remember, we always want to stress the expense ratios. You can pay a financial advisor 1 or 2%, but when you annualize that and then you grow your money over time, that is an insane amount. So when you buy an ETF that is diversified and passively managed, you're not paying much, you're going to save a ton of money in the long term. Always remember, when it comes to ETFs like this, we're looking long term, we're going to buy low, we're going to buy high, it does not matter. We're just going to continue to hold and grow our wealth. Now, if you're still watching the video, I want to know from you guys, what do you think about the ETFs I talked about? If you have a better ETF, let me know down in the comments. I do my best to respond to every single comment on all of my videos. And if you haven't already, make sure you smash the like button, subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you guys next week. Take care.